I'm Jono Buchanan, and in this video we're going to look at reverse reverb techniques. Now, if you want to hear a real-world example before we get into the project that we've got open here, go and listen to Personal Jesus by Depeche Mode. The very beginning of that song features this great reverse reverb. And the thing that's interesting about that sound is that, of course, in nature, reverb can only be triggered by sounds that have happened. It's an acoustic space vibrating and responding to a sound that happens. So the very idea of a reverb that somehow knows that a sound is going to happen and builds up, swells up, is obviously an impossibility, and as a result it's really exciting. It's your classic post-production technique. It's used loads in pop and dance music, it's used a lot in trailers as well, and in this video we're going to see how we can apply it to our Logic project here. So firstly, let's just listen to the track we're going to be working on, and then we'll see how we can introduce reverse reverb to it.
Loving ain't simple with you anymore. We have become opposites. No, loving ain't simple with you anytime. Battle lines drawn.
Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to focus on this piano part. I'm going to mute the other tracks within the project altogether. We're just going to listen to the piano. So it sounds like this by itself. And you can see that what's happening with the sound at the moment is that it's been played back from its instrument, and you can also see that there is a reverb coming from bus 2. So I've got an auxiliary bus which is featuring the reverb that is present on this sound. So it stands to reason that if I was to solo just the reverb and we were listening to it, we'll only hear the reverb. And sure enough, we are. So that's fine, right? I can open up the mixer and I'm in a position then just to come to the bounce button, capture this reverb, and then turn it round and it will be backwards. Well, it's not quite as simple as that. And the reason for that is that we just need to think about what happens when we turn sounds around, when we reverse them. Let's suppose I was to do that. I was just going to solo the reverb, capture it as an audio file, bring it into my project, and then turn it around. Well, if you think about it, that means that the first note of the piano would be over here in the reverb. By turning the file round, the first thing becomes the last thing. So I haven't actually got a reverse reverb effect which I can use then, because the order of the notes is going to be the wrong way round. What I need to do in order to create a backwards reverb effect is to turn round the piano part first. Let's see how that works. What I'm going to do is come out of solo mode for the reverb. I'm going to come back to the piano, and what I'm going to do is to bounce it in place. That means I'm going to capture it as an audio file, and I'm going to call this piano reversed, because in a minute I'm going to reverse it. So what we've now got is the piano part introduced into our project. It's going to sound exactly the same. It's still got the auxiliary routing that I'm going to need in a moment, but now that it's an audio file, I can reverse it. And I can do that by double-clicking on the audio file itself, making sure that File is selected here, coming into Functions and selecting Reverse. And what that's going to do is to turn the piano part around. So fine, now what I've done is I've reversed the original part. Now I don't want to capture the actual original piano, I just want to capture its reverb. So now I am going to do the thing we did a moment ago, which is to come back into the mixer. I'm going to find the part itself. I'm going to find the reverb that's on this sound, which is on bus 2, and I'm going to solo that auxiliary, which means that now we've got the reversed piano triggering this bust reverb. So what I'm then going to do is to put a loop around the area where I want this part to capture. So I'm starting at the very beginning, but I'm deliberately adding a little bit or a couple of bars at the end to make sure that the final note that's reversed is going to have its reverb tail play, and we're not going to be just sort of cutting that off early. And having selected solo for that auxiliary, I can now come to the bounce button. What I'm going to do is to make sure that I capture this in sort of full, with all of its sort of frequency content. So I'm selecting a PCM file, and I'm crucially going to add this to the project of my track, which means that straight away it's going to be available to me to use within this project. So I'm going to press OK. I'm going to call this piano reverse reverb. and I'm going to just press bounce and it will run through. Okay, now what we can do is we can move this part out of the way. We're not going to need that again, but I'm going to just keep it in the project for now. And what I'm instead going to do is to open up the audio files options for this particular track, because I added it to the project straight away. This reverse reverb part that I've created is here. And what I'm going to do is to introduce that to my track again, and then close this down. Now remember, this is my reversed reverb. So what I need to do in order to get the notes ordered the right way round again is once again to reverse it. I'm going to double click here and I'm going to reverse it. So remember, we reversed the original part and now we're reversing the reverb that was created from that original part, which should mean that the notes are the right way round again. Okay, now you'll remember that I put an extra 2 bars on the end of this project. So what I'm going to do, because they were at the end, they're now at the beginning because I reversed it, is I'm going to take those 2 bars off and I'm going to put this part back in time. And this should now match up with the original piano part itself, which I'm going to reintroduce to the project. So we've got the MIDI playing the original notes, and then we've got this reversed reverb capture, which should be anticipating those notes now because the reverb is backwards. Okay, so that's working really nicely. What we've done there is to create a reversed reverb part, which is producing this really sort of atmospheric, quite interesting sound. Okay, that's quite a lot of steps, isn't it? So let's have a look at it again, and this time we're going to do the same thing, but with the vocal part. So I'm going to come out of this part for a moment. We'll mute these 2 piano parts. We'll reintroduce the track and just remind ourselves how it sounds. And then we're going to capture a reverse reverb for the vocal.
Loving ain't simple with you anymore. We have become opposites. No, loving ain't simple with you anytime. Battle lines drawn.
Okay, now we can see for this track that the vocal is one long audio file. It's not broken up into individual chunks, which makes it very easy to capture. But I still don't like taking the lead vocal of a project and reversing it, and then having to reverse it again later on. I'd almost rather just make sure that this stays exactly as it is, and that any reverse reverb technique I might want to apply happens on another track. So the first thing I'm going to do is to select the vocal track and duplicate it using this button here. And then I'm going to copy this down to here so that I've got a duplicate of the vocal part. Now, be careful. In Logic, when we copy an audio file like that from one track to another, we're not creating a brand new audio file. We're using the same audio file twice. And to show you what I mean, if I double click on this duplicate that I've created, let's just keep the waveform display behind active. If I come to the functions menu and reverse this copy of this file, not only will it turn around, but the original will turn around as well because it's the same file. So if I want to create a backwards version of this vocal that's independent from the original, I need to not do it like that. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to reverse it a second time and we're back to where we started. What I need to do instead is I need to come to this new audio file that I've created. I'm going to control click it and I'm going to convert it to a new audio file, which is an option that's here. If this option doesn't exist in a list that exists for you at the top, you'll find it in convert. So come down to convert and here you will find convert to new audio file. And when I do that, I can make a completely new version of this vocal, which I'm going to just call reverse vocal. I can save it and you can see, first of all, its color changes. It goes back to being the default color for audio files, so I can see that it's independent. But of course, that will be confirmed for me if I come back and reverse this file, the original is going to stay the right way round. Okay, so because we duplicated the settings of the vocal part, we've still got all of the effects that exist within its track, but we've also crucially got the auxiliary, which is generating the reverb for this sound. I'm going to do the same thing as before. I'm going to keep my loop as it is right now, including an extra 2 bars at the end, and I'm going to come back to this track. I'm going to select the auxiliary bus where the reverb is being generated, and I'm going to solo it so that I'm just hearing the reverb by itself. Let's just hear how that sounds. Because it's soloed, we should only hear reverb. Okay, so at the moment, these vocal parts are both playing, and as a result, I'm getting reverb generated from both the original and from the reverse. So let's mute the original part. Okay, that sounds fun. So what we're going to do is come back into the mixer. We're again going to come to the bounce button, checking that we've got our reverb soloed. And this time I'm going to again repeat the process, add this to the project, and I'm going to call it backwards vocal reverb and press bounce. Okay, I'm sure there's a hidden message in there somewhere. So what we're going to do is to come back to our tracks, go and find this new part that we've added. And again, what we can do is introduce it either on a new track, or we can replace the one that we used a moment ago. Let's pop this over here because we don't need that one anymore either. So I'll put this back on the track above where the original sound was generated. And again, what I need to do is to come back into my reverse reverb and turn it around so that the first phrase of the vocal lines up with the original vocal part. And again, what I'm going to do is to shave the first 2 bars because we added those 2 bars at the end. And that should mean that we're lining this first phrase up with the original vocal. Let's have a listen to those 2 things together.
Loving ain't simple with you anymore. We have become.
Okay, so I need to just make another manual adjustment here, just taking this back another bar.
Loving ain't simple with you anymore. We have become opposites. No, loving ain't simple with you anytime. Battle lines drawn.
Okay, let's put that into the mix now and hear how that sounds with the other instruments.
Loving ain't simple with you anymore. We have become opposites. No, loving ain't simple with you anytime. Battle lines drawn.
Now, once we've got this sound into our track, of course, we could just leave it like that. We could turn it down. It's a bit loud right now, but we can turn it down. I'm going to leave it at this volume for now so we can hear some additional changes. But of course, this is a completely independent part. It's in no way tied to the original vocal. So it can have its own effects. It can do things totally differently to the way that the original vocal is happening. So one thing that might be quite nice to try would be to, let's say, introduce something like a tremolo effect. If I come into this track here, or into the effects for this track, come down to modulation and come to tremolo, what I could do would be to get this sound moving from one side of the mix to the other. I'm going to select a sort of half note maybe effect. We'll keep the depth nice and big so that it's moving all the way from one side to the other. And now we're going to get this kind of ethereal moving texture behind the lead vocal.
Loving ain't simple with you anymore. We have become opposites. Battle lines drawn.
That works really nicely. Similarly, we could apply delays, or we could use filters to just keep things moving so that this reverse reverb is constantly just providing this kind of slightly ethereal texture behind the lead vocal. And of course, we can turn it down as well if it all feels like it's becoming too much. So in this video, we've seen all of the steps required to create a reverse reverb. Remember, the source sound that you're working on will need to be reversed first. And what that means is that if you're trying to apply this technique to MIDI regions, you'll need to turn them into audio first. Turn them around, solo the reverb, which you've created an auxiliary so that it's playing by itself without the original source sound, and capture that as an audio file, adding it to your project. Bring that file back in on a new audio track, turn it around and line it up with the original part, and you'll find that it's now preceded by this really ethereal reverb technique. And as we've seen right there at the end, we can then start applying new effects, new techniques, new volume relationships between the original part and the reverse reverb too, to make it a really interesting part of your production.